everyone, hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're taking a look at the newest upper that I'm offering through my company and my website, of course. This has a very silly name called the Jaeger, I want to say, because I couldn't really think of a better name for it. So this is an 11.5 Geissele upper receiver. So of course the heart and soul of this build is an 11.5-inch Geissele cold hammer forge chrome lined barrel. Now, that being said, it is also Black Friday-ish. I believe this video is going up on Saturday, but my sale should be running through Monday. Basically, everything is already out of stock as of filming this video, but hopefully there's a couple uppers left in stock at a very reduced price. Now, of course, these are my upper receivers that I build and sell, so you should view this video as basically an ad. Now, getting into the parts list, to start off with, we'll go ahead and start with the barrel. Of course, that's the best part of the build. That is the Geissele 11.5 4140 chrome moly vanadium steel barrel. Now, the barrel on top of that is cold hammer forged and chrome lined. Now, Geissele barrels are well regarded as being properly gassed and being extremely durable, while also maintaining a very high level of accuracy. Every Geissele barrel that I've tested to date, including this one, which we'll get into a little bit later on, has been extremely accurate. Now, getting into material selection, this is a 4140 barrel versus a 4150 barrel. The last two numbers of those are the carbon content. So a 4150 barrel has a 5.0% carbon content, whereas the 4140 in the Geissele barrel is, of course, going to have a 4.0 or a 4% carbon content. Now, there's pros and cons to each of that. If you have a higher carbon content, it tends to be a little bit higher in terms of strength metrics, but also then more brittle, where 4140 might have better elongation and elasticity. Again, we're talking about steel here, but still might have better numbers in that regard. So there's pros and cons to both. And what Geissele is doing here for this is going to be tuned towards ultimate durability while still maintaining accuracy. Now, the finish itself on the barrel is phosphate. This is not a black oxide barrel. This is a phosphate finish barrel. So it's phosphate on the outside, chrome lined on the inside. Geissele has done a really good job with the chrome lining. Not sure if they're doing that in-house or if they have a different shop, a chrome shop, doing that for them, but whoever they're doing it, whether it's them or somebody else, they're doing a very good job of applying that chrome evenly, still maintaining a high level of accuracy. Now, getting into the profile on the barrel, it is very similar to a government profile in the back, but then as it gets past the .750 gas block journal, it actually has a tapered down to where a government profile will have a much thicker section at the end. This has a downward tapered section, and then it comes up to where the muzzle device mounts onto the 1/2x28 threads. So I believe this is 2 ounces or 3 ounces lighter than a government profile, and again, it is taking that weight away from the front of the barrel. In my personal opinion, I don't really care about that. A lot of people like that sort of thing. They like to see 1 or 2 ounces removed from the end of the barrel. For me personally, it doesn't really matter, especially when we're only talking about 11.5. It matters a lot more when we get into 14.5, 16, 18, 20 inches, so on and so forth, where not only is it heavier, but that weight is also pushed further out. On 11.5, not that big of a deal, but again, Geissele has removed a little bit of the weight from the end of the barrel while still, again, maintaining accuracy. Now, very nicely on these barrels, they are actually dimpled from the factory, which you would be very surprised how many very expensive barrels are not dimpled from the factory, which is, of course, an additive process that I have to do later on. Now, the gas blocks themselves are 4140 heat treated. They have a nitride finish on them, very high quality. The one thing I will say about these gas blocks is that we did a little bit of a different assembly process on them. So instead of our normal Permatex 272 high temperature Loctite, we did a rock set on the gas block, so it will never move. However, they are not pinned in place by default. The reason for that is that these are very expensive barrels, and the most expensive barrels I've ever used. And so I did not want to inadvertently damage them with my own pin setup. So if you want them pinned, I will absolutely do that for you. But by default, they are torqued to 30-inch pounds on the dimple and, of course, have high temperature rock set applied. So they're never going to move. But again, if you want that additional security of pin, even though it doesn't need it in this case, if you do want it, it is something that I will do for you for free. Again, you just need to leave it in the order notes. Now, moving on to the handguard. This is, of course, the BCM MCMR. This is the 10.5-inch version. So what you get here is 7-sided M-lock, so you have M-lock all the way around the handguard, and of course a full-length pick rail on top that is T-marked if you care about that sort of thing. Now, when we talk about the BCM rail, it is a very good rail while not breaking the bank. It is kind of in that mid-range price. It is a far step above the quality level of a Midwest Industries handguard while costing about the same. So if we talk about the rail itself, while it is of course 7-sided M-lock, it does have some lightning cuts underneath the Picatinny rail. However, it does not have a lot of material removed, which will help it quite a bit when it comes to actual rail strength itself. So there's two components when we talk about rail strength. There is the lockup itself in the rear, and then there is the actual, of course, rail itself. Because, of course, you can have a great lockup system and then have a very thin rail that bends anytime you drop it, or you can have, of course, a very strong, very thick rail with a really terrible clamp style lockup, and it just doesn't work very well and it rotates on its own, right? So you want to have both of those good. It doesn't matter if one is good, if the other is bad, because of course the weak point will always be the weak point. Now, the lockup itself on these BCM rails, these are fairly annoying to install. So the way that they have done this is they have a very small steel barrel nut that is oversized. So there's like a tolerance of like almost nothing, like basically nothing between the OD of the barrel nut and the ID of the handguard. So to get these handguards onto the barrel nut, you need to use a rubber mallet, and it can be quite annoying. You do need to use quite a bit of force just to get the handguard to slide over the barrel nut, and it doesn't slide over. You need to force it over. It will not go over on its own. Now, once you have the handguard forced into position, you then have 2 steel wedges and 2 steel cross bolts that clamp the rail down to the barrel nut. The screws actually fit into channels on the barrel nut so that it is impossible for the rail to move forward or backwards. Very nicely on the cross bolts, one of them has a notch cut into it, or several notches cut into it. So once you get this side torqued down properly and thread the other side through, it cannot loosen because of course it has that notch cut into it, so it will butt up against the actual steel screw itself. So for that to come loose, it would have to shear through a solid steel screw, which is, again, probably never going to happen. On top of that, we use blue Loctite to just add an additional level of security to it. Now, another very interesting thing that they've done on here, this is a bit odd, but they also have a free-floating steel anti-rotation insert. So it inserts into the back of the rail, and then as you're forcing it onto the upper receiver, you need to make sure that that is on there before you install it. Otherwise, it is very difficult to take the rail off and then reinstall it and then put it back on again. It's not a very fun process to do. Ask me how I know that. Now, very nicely on the steel anti-rotation insert is that it fits very, very tightly against the upper receiver, at least all the upper receivers that I've installed a BCM MCMR on. And again, it is steel, not aluminum. So like on the Midwest Industries combat rails, I've bent their aluminum anti-rotation tabs, so they helped a little bit, but not all that much because, of course, they were the thing to go. The rail didn't bend, but the aluminum anti-rotation tabs did. In this case, you have an actual steel insert versus aluminum. Overall, they are an excellent rail, not only for the money, but just in general, they are very hard to beat. They give you all of the M-lock you could want, all of the mounting options possible. Currently, I just have a BCM CAG, BCM rail scales on it, and of course, the new HRT light, which is it's pretty bright. Now, moving back to the next most important part of the build, that is, of course, going to be the BCG. Now, this is the AO Precision True Mil-Spec BCG, or the TMS BCG, as I call them. Very importantly, they have several different levels of BCG. So you have the standard 9310 bolt phosphate chrome, you have the Carpenter 158 phosphate chrome, and then you have the TMS, or the True Mil-Spec BCG. Now, the differences on the True Mil-Spec BCG is that this is, of course, a Carpenter 158 bolt. And on top of that, they are individually high pressure tested and then magnetically particle inspected on an individual level. So not on a batch inspection or anything else like that. They go through a true individual level inspection, which is, of course, the maximum quality control that you would want on a BCG, and that is what these are. Now, on top of that higher level of quality control and certification process, every single component on the BCG, so every single component is down to the ASTM spec. So it is not just, mil spec, it is actually down to the ASTM spec for, again, a mil spec BCG. Currently, these are the exact same bolts that are serving in the FN M4s. I believe AO owns part of that contract. And so this is a true mil spec BCG, grade 8 fasteners, 4130 key, chrome lined on the carrier and the key, of course, stake to mil spec, gasket sealer in between the key and the body of the carrier, phosphate chrome. Not only are they an excellent BCG just in general, but they're also impossible to beat from a value perspective. Now, I didn't stop there with the BCGs either, so these also have another upgrade installed on them. So these actually all have the BCM Enhanced Extractor Kit upgrade. What that is a 20% stronger extractor spring plus Vuitton O-ring and insert. So the amount of extraction force that you get on these is immense. So the initial design for the BCM Extractor Upgrade Kit was for the Daniel Defense Mark 18, which is a 10-3, has a very violent recoil cycle, so they wanted to enhance the extraction force that you get on the case because, of course, you need that when you're dealing with a very short barrel, very little dwell time, that sort of thing. Now on an 11.5, you of course have a little bit more dwell time. It's not quite as violent as a 10.3, depending on the gas setting, which we'll get into in just a minute. But overall, these have the BCM extractor kit upgrades, meaning that you get an insane amount of extraction force. Now, briefly talking about the charging handles, these are the Breek Arms Micro Mod 1 charging handles, so they have slightly shorter latches. They are, of course, still ambidextrous. These ones are in OD green. I thought it was just kind of a cool color combo, just a little bit of color in the back end without being too obnoxious. Now, the micros, again, they are just a little bit smaller than the full-size ones, so they're a little bit less obtrusive, a little bit less likely to get snagged. Still ambidextrous, still can be used, of course, from either side. On top of that, the Mod 1s have a cut in the top right and in the bottom right side of the charging handle to direct gases away from you if you are shooting suppressed, or if you're a left-handed shooter, to send those gases right into your face. But again, for a right-handed shooter, it does have those relief cuts on the top and bottom of the charging handle to at least attempt to get rid of some of those gases instead of just having them come straight back to your face, as well as, of course, a higher shelf in the back. Very importantly, they are the forged 7075, which is appropriate for a charging handle. There are a lot of charging handles out there floating around that are 60-61, which is about half the strength to weight ratio. So while they're probably fine for most things, you don't want to be yanking really hard on a 60-61 charging handle. They probably will eventually break on you. 70-75 is the way to go for a charging handle, and these ones come in at under 1 ounce. Now, the upper receiver on this is, of course, the test upper that you would have seen all of the shooting footage on and some of the other stuff that I'm rolling in. This one here has a slightly different upper receiver. This is a unmarked Aero Precision upper receiver. The standard models will have a Ballistic Advantage upper receiver, which is identical to an Aero Precision upper receiver, except for the fact that it will have the BA logo and symbol engraved on the back end. That's the only real difference. Other than that, it's still 70-75 forged aluminum. It is mil spec in terms of M4 feed ramps, in terms of standard forward assist, dust cover, everything else that you would want, hard coat anodized type 3, but again, just a high quality mil spec style upper receiver. You don't really need anything special for an upper receiver. You might like a little bit more angular cuts or different features or whatnot, but at the end of the day, a mil spec upper is perfectly fine. Now, getting into assembly, since that is rounding out the parts list, other than the A2 flash hider on the front end. A2 flash hiders, they can be changed out if you want for any muzzle device on the market. Just let me know what you want and I will get it ordered, installed, or of course you can do that on your own as well. Now, getting into the assembly process, it's going to be the standard to all of my other upper receivers. So you have a lapped upper receiver, as well as the barrel is bedded to the upper receiver using a Loctite 620. It's a grain expanding hardening compound. All that does is take up any of the gap between the barrel and the upper receiver, making them act like one continuous piece on top of the lapping to ensure a true mounting surface. Just means you get the most accuracy possible out of your platform. You know, maybe it makes a quarter MOA difference at most, but that's still a little bit extra that you're getting out of without too much work. Now, again, the barrel nuts are torqued down to 50 foot-pounds sequentially, so you start at 25 brake, 35 brake, and eventually end at 50 foot-pounds. Now, the threads on the upper receiver extension are also coated in a Permatex anti-seize solution. That way there, if at some point you ever need me to re-barrel it for you, because yes, the first re-barrel is still free on all of my upper receivers, including these with the very expensive Geissele barrel. So again, all that helps to do is just make sure that that barrel nut doesn't lock up to the upper receiver over many thousand rounds and years of use. So now that that's about it, we need to talk about shootability and accuracy. Those are really the last two things that we need to talk about. So shootability, as I didn't mention it earlier, but this barrel has a .069 gas port size. Now, .069 for an 11.5 carbine is perfectly fine. I think that is very acceptable. I don't know anyone who would actually complain about that. So to compare that to other manufacturers, Ballistic Advantage and Roscoe on their 11.5 carbines, I believe they're both .072, so they have 3 thousandths larger of a gas port size. As you guys probably will have seen in the intro, this was ejecting only M193, so I was only shooting some ZSR 5.56 M193, so just 55 grain ball, and it ejected that at 330 with just carbine buffers and springs. You do not need any sort of heavy buffers, strong springs. One of the most common complaints that I get with some of my uppers is that people will throw in a Volter A5 with an H6 buffer and a spring code blue and be like, hey, my upper's not cycling it. It's because it really doesn't need that. Just carbine buffers, carbine springs, and then those heavier buffers and springs are for an overgassed setup or for shooting suppressed or with your very specific hot loads that you're talking about. But in general, if you're just shooting 5.56 unsuppressed, carbine buffers, carbine springs, and then move on from there. So again, 330 ejection with just 5.56 M193, I am very happy with. It is a very soft upper receiver. It barely moves inside of 15 yards, even if you're pulling the trigger as fast as you can. Again, very, very soft shooting upper receivers while not being unreliable. There might be a couple barrels on the market with a slightly smaller gas port for an 11.5 carbine. If Criterion makes an 11.5, it's probably like a .067 or something like that. So maybe just a hair softer. But again, for 99.9% of people, these are going to be one of the softest shooting upper receivers on the market. Again, for an 11.5. And again, if you are shooting suppressed or with stupid hot ammo, then you can start to think about, okay, I need an H1, H2, H3 buffer, so on and so forth, depending on your specific setup. Now, accuracy is always anecdotal to what I am able to get on that specific day with this specific barrel upper receiver. And fortunately, what I got was pretty good. So just using some of that Turkish 5.56, that ZSR M193, I was able to get about an inch at 50 yards, so about 2.5 MOA, perfectly fine for just ball ammo. Moving on to Frontier Hornady 68 grain boat tail hollow point match. That came in at, again, probably about 2.5 MOA, but that ammo has not grouped well in anything that I've shot it through yet, but eventually I'll find something that actually likes it. Then moving on to some PMC X-Tac 62 grain green tip. Well, that shot a very respectable 1.5 MOA group, something that I was very happy with. Moving on to Hornady Black 75 grain boat tail hollow point. That came in at about 1.5 MOA with a called flyer, so there was a bad trigger pull on my part. It does happen. Usually I am the limiting factor when it comes to accuracy in just about anything. 75 grain Hornady Super Performance, their match load. Again, a called flyer in there, but still about 1.5 MOA, so overall still fine. And then just for fun, at the end of the day, I happen to have a box of 40 grain Fiocchi VMAX, which is again just a varmint load. That came in at sub MOA with 5 shots landing in the exact same hole. Not really sure what was going on with that, but it was pretty cool to see that happen with a very odd ammo choice. So with a good setup, competent shooter, the right ammo that specific barrel likes on that specific day, you should definitely be able to achieve MOA or better, and you should certainly be under 2 MOA with just about everything out there, which for me is more than acceptable. So what you're getting here is, for, again, I believe these are right now on sale for $700. You're getting one of the best barrels on the market. Cold Hammer Forge, chrome lined, 4140, very good gas setting, .069. It is a very, very durable barrel, a very accurate barrel, on top of the fact that it is a very shootable barrel. It basically does all of the things that you want it to do. On top of that, you have a very good rail for attaching whatever you want it to do. This is an upper receiver that right out of the box, you want to throw a peck, a lamb, anything on the end of this guy, and you can totally do that. On top of that, we have a true mil-spec BCG, again, the best value on the market, on top of the fact that it is just a very good BCG. So this is an upper receiver that I think does compete very well with just about anything out there in terms of both part selection and build quality. So I think that for $700, this is very hard, if not impossible, to beat in terms of value. You might be able to throw something together that is close to it, and I'm sure that you guys can comment down below what parts you would rather see used. But overall, I think that this is, again, for a duty style upper receiver, something that is very, very hard to use. Not only you could use it for classes or competitions, it will do both of those things very well with, again, that level of accuracy and shootability, on top of the fact that it is a very durable setup. So with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of the Jaeger in the comments down below. If there is a different part I should have used somewhere, what you guys think of Geissele in general. And with all that out of the way, guys, I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.